So how do you get into that short list? That's the real question that marketing has today, because only 5% are going to raise their hands at any given point. But you have to build that runway for the future shortlists to be made.
What is Mindshare, and is it the secret to B2B marketing success? Welcome back to a fresh episode of Breaking B2B. I'm your host, Sam Dunning, founder over at breakingb2b.com, and joining me today, I've got Kelly Cheng. Kelly is the CMO over at Goldcast. Kelly, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
You're very welcome. Excited to talk all things Mindshare. I feel it's quite a big and timely topic right now. I see a lot of folks, especially on kind of socials from the B2B, from the SaaS perspective, talking a heck of a lot more about brand, about Mindshare, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like the focus is shifting a lot to this, at least in my circles, in my feed. So we're going to be diving into things like, what does Mindshare actually mean from a B2B perspective, why it's important, how it stacks up to more common B2B strategies, be it inbound marketing, outbound, demand generation and such, and how B2B marketers, B2B founders, revenue leaders tuning in can practically take steps to start building that mindshare. So with that, Kelly, what would be your summary? What are your thoughts? What does Mindshare really mean today?
Yeah, I completely agree with you that there is definitely a conversation going on right now on socials on the shift between like the demand versus mindshare. And in terms of mindshare, the true definition of mindshare is about occupying space in your prospect's mind before they're actively looking to buy. So it's really, building that awareness, that perception and emotional connection. There is that 95-5 rule where 95% of your target audience is not in market to buy, only 5% is. So when you have those intent signals, which I think we've, over-indexed on, intent signals are great, but that's great for that 5%. But what about that 95%? When their budget is not currently up for grabs, their mind share is. So, I think that ultimately traditional B2B marketing focuses really heavily on capturing that buyer intent signals and then jumping straight into that conversation. So I've worked in organizations where marketing is really just supporting sales. They're just driving leads, so sales team has leads to follow up on. But mindshare marketing really recognizes that the buying decision actually starts much, much earlier than the sales conversation. Many people are doing their own research before even having a sales conversation. So when those intent signals fire, you've really, it's too late. And so you really have to start your investment in mindshare, which is way before the intent signals.
Got it. Are you tired of competitors ranking above you on Google, stealing traffic, leads, and mindshare from dream clients every time they're searching for your services or offers on Google? At Breaking B2B, we fix that with our unusual approach to SEO, content marketing, and websites. We craft B2B SEO strategies and websites for revenue, not vanity. Head over to breakingb2b.com to check our results, pricing, or to book a call with me. And do you feel that building Mindshare, so I mean, we've had kind of demand generation folks on the show over the last few years, and we've dived into stuff around the 95-5 rule, like you say there, that I think even at a push, kind of 3 to 5% of your target or total addressable audience being in market at one time is pretty good. And I suppose also depending on the size of that TAM, that could be very small or it could be very large, depending on how many ideal prospects fit that. So I guess it makes sense to make your brand top of mind for that massive chunk of the market that's, like you say, could potentially be a customer one day, but when that is, we don't know. So how does that, compare to kind of traditional demand generation or kind of putting content in front of folks?
Yeah, so demand generation focuses on the ultimate goal of generating leads and opportunities. It's really about identifying known people, so then you can go and do your follow-up, your, aggressive outbounding, inbounding messaging. But Mindshare really is about getting your content everywhere all at once. So it's not just capturing their information. That's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to move them along the buyer journey. So then as they're moving across the buyer journey, they're also building trust with your brand. The ultimate goal, at least at Goldcast, when we're looking to build Mindshare, is to be that number one resource, that go-to place for our target audience. So when they have a pain point, if they're struggling, they have a question, they come to our brand for that answer. So when time comes to buy, naturally, they're also going to come to us for that resource.
So how do you folks consider the buying journey? Is it split into the typical stages of awareness, or do you look at it a bit differently?
So, it's funny because, I've had so many conversations with different marketing leaders, and most recently, I think back to a conversation I had with a marketing leader at Atlassian, and her name is Ashley Faust, and she explained it to me as not so much a funnel anymore, but more like a playground, because the reality is that buying groups are getting much larger. I think Forrester has recently released their recent numbers, which is, enterprise organizations, it's up to 22 people large, and 9 out of those 22 people don't actually work at those organizations. They're outside consultants or influencers on the outside. So your account-based marketing, that really linear way of doing B2B marketing that historically has been the blueprint, no longer works. And the way that she explains it is it's like a playground, because one person can be playing on the swings and one person can be going down the slide. It doesn't really matter what part of their journey is, as long as they're engaging with your brand and it's influencing the overall account. That's what really makes the difference.
That's that. I like that. I like that saying. Like it's not a buying journey; it's more of a playground. And I think marketers have kind of always known that. It just feels easier to put it into certain stages, especially if you're trying to justify spend for like paid media or new campaigns or new programs you're trying to build out.
Yeah, and especially because so many of these like marketing tactics are mapped to the funnel. Like, for example, when you're doing follow up, I don't know if it's just me, but I've heard that a lot of people are getting bribed in their inboxes to take demos. I can't tell you how many $100 gift cards I've been teased with if I give 30, 40 minutes of my time for a demo. Ultimately, that doesn't work. That bribery, that tactic doesn't work if I'm not in market. If I take the demo, it'll be only because I want the gift card at the end of it, not because I have any intention to buy. So it's really, really making sure that once you do execute those outbound tactics, you have enough mind share for it to make sense, for it to actually pay back. Otherwise, you're really just paying out the gift cards with no opportunities being generated.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. I need to do a dedicated episode actually, specifically on gifting, because it's funny because I used to think that giving gift cards was like terrible and an awful idea, but I've got a friend, I think it's Silvio, that runs a business called Ad Conversion, and I'm pretty sure he's had really solid use cases. So I need to get either him or someone else back on the podcast to talk specifically about that topic and see who's seeing success from it, because like it feels like 50% of marketers are like it's bribery, and then 50% are like it's actually working to drive closed won deals.
Yep. I think there's a time and place for it. It's really that fine line between when does it turn from bribery into actual value, because you're not just giving away that demo in exchange, but your demo is actually valuable. That's actually worth someone's time. So it's really when a buyer is in a stage that's ready to buy and they know who you are and they have the intention of taking that demo and turning that demo into something, that's when that gift really makes a lot of sense.
Let's go back to, you said the ultimate goal is becoming the number one resource, and I think you mentioned when kind of your target prospects have the problem you solve, or are trying to get the job that you help get done, or trying to fix an issue that you're going to fix. Dive into that a bit deeper. Like what does that look like?
Yeah. So I'll give an example. When I first started at Goldcast about 3.5 years ago, one thing I really wanted to make our brand be around is community. That was a gap that I saw in the event marketing world. That was back when Goldcast was really known as an event tech company. And we built a community because that was the gap. There was no safe place for event and field marketers to go to get advice, to get vendor selection ideas, to get venue ideas. And so we created that Slack community, and I made a pretty hard and strict rule and said no sales allowed in the community. Our sales team's allowed to join the community. They can watch the conversation, but they are absolutely not allowed to prospect. There is no selling in the community. It is a completely protected space. And I got a lot of pushback and skepticism on that approach because, what's the point of creating something, investing in some marketing if it doesn't turn into opportunities? Well, it does turn into opportunities. It's just not forcing it to happen. And so as we were building that community, we hosted events. We had, fireside chats with different event marketing leaders. We created content. We created a compensation guide every year to allow marketers to know if they're being paid below the line. And over time, we've built this reputation of being that number one resource. And so what ended up happening is that our inbound funnel really came from our community. A lot of people went to the community to ask for, vendor ideas for virtual event platforms. And many people suggested Goldcast, and there came our inbound demo funnel. So from creating that community, that safe space where we're building Mindshare across that particular community of our ICP, we were able to, create an engine that really helped fuel our inbound funnel.
I like it. How difficult was that to build out?
Difficult in a sense that, I had never done it before, but I think that was actually the beauty of it. You don't want to have a cookie cutter community where you're just ripping and replacing and copying another community out there. It required us to really pay attention, listen to some of the people in the community about their pain points, and design a space over time that really suited the pain points. So while it definitely took a lot of investment and oversight, it ultimately became worth it. Even today, we're seeing it organically grow. We're about 4,000 people large now globally, and we're seeing everybody, do local meetups without even, Goldcast funding it. And so it's a really beautiful thing to see when you, start a fire and it kind of grows into something really beautiful.
Yeah. I get that. I totally agree that. I think having no sales reps in it was a smart idea, and I think, like you say, understanding that there's not going to be immediate pipeline, but if you have the right audience in there and there's something that's genuinely worthwhile for them with the conversation that's going on, whether, like you say, that's the moderator as well as the folks in there kind of sharing useful tips, advice, asking questions, all that kind of stuff, I can see how that can be valuable long term. What was the timeline? Like you said, did you say 4,000, 5,000 people there?
Yeah,
like,
so we started it about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And so after 3 years, we're about 3,000, 4,000,
Nice.
and still growing. A lot of how we grow is, through word of mouth, through our customers. We run a lot of our own events, and, just having our ICP and our community members love us. There's a lot of word of mouth going on.
Yeah, that's great. And was, like, to build it out, did that involve a lot of, initially, I suppose in the early days, was it a lot of outreach, or was it a lot of kind of paid spend behind it to make folks aware of it? Like, what did that look like?
We were rather scrappy. There was really no paid spend behind it. We created a landing page with a form for people to sign up. We have a free Slack account, so it was very, very low overhead. And we have a, social community marketing manager who would just do a lot of one-to-one outreach to our customers who were in our ICP, and then also to our prospects to, get them to join. We would host, as I mentioned, our own events. We had a series called Event Marketers Live, where every week we had a show that was really, really targeted to our event marketers. And every episode we would, plug our community, say, join our community. We're talking about all this kind of stuff. There's different channels for different topics, and really, really saw that as an avenue for growing.
Was that very difficult to get buy-in from the rest of the leadership team? Like, was anyone skeptical?
I think that is actually going to be the biggest hurdle for anyone looking to, really execute Mindshare marketing, because it requires investment. Luckily at Goldcast, I work with founders that understand marketing. We market to marketers. And so it is really critical for our leadership and executive team to understand how this all works. And so it didn't take much for me to get buy-in for that. It naturally made a lot of sense when we had a lot of our customers, agreeing on this approach. But I do think that is one of the biggest challenges, is how do you prove, the value of Mindshare, because that is a lagging indicator. Your demand efforts are for short-term value. You actually see the lead volume coming in, and we work with the sales team to generate that pipeline. But when you're talking about Mindshare, the metrics are a little bit less defined when it comes to ROI. But I think it is critical to have that top-down buy-in on understanding why Mindshare is so valuable.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it is difficult. I can see it being difficult. I'm also in a lucky situation where my ICP are marketing leaders, so a lot of the time the topics we talk about kind of ring true. But I can imagine if you're in perhaps more of an industry that's maybe a bit more traditional, a bit more old school, maybe a bit more in person or things like that, or something that's historically been only paid media driven or events driven, it might be a lot more difficult to get that buy-in from leadership, where these concepts are, I guess, something they're not necessarily used to. Like, their version of community might be like in-person dinners or meeting at events or that kind
Correct.
of stuff, and it's like something that's almost like, how does that work?
Yeah. I think it's really to get that buy-in. It's really, I don't want to say dumbing it down, but speaking the same language. I think marketers understand, because we all are part of that buying journey, and it's our job to understand the buying journey. But if you work with a CEO or a CFO that doesn't understand the buying journey, have them understand it. The buying journey has changed from 20, 30 years ago. People are not picking up trade publication magazines, looking at a print ad and saying, oh, I need this product. Today, buyers are using over 10 channels throughout their entire journey. There's 300 different touch points that are needed to influence all 22 stakeholder influencers in a deal. And, vendor shortlists have also shrunk. Meanwhile, the vendor options have grown. So I only have time to get demos from 3 vendors, but I know that if I want a chatbot, there's probably hundreds out there. But the ones that have won my mind space, that's Drift, that's Intercom, and that's Qualified, because those are the brands that I know and trust. And so so how do you get into that shortlist? That's the real question that marketing has today, because only 5% are going to raise their hands at any given point. But you have to build that runway for the future shortlists to be made. And I think that for a lot of teams, they struggle with figuring out how to actually build that buying journey and fill it with content because of resource constraints. How I approach it is really, really thinking through like a video first strategy, because I think that video is the most powerful tool for winning mindshare in the B2B world. It's the medium that people prefer to engage with. People prefer watching a video over reading text. A lot of people say that video plays a critical role across the entire journey, from awareness all the way to consideration. And so if you have video, you can really, really build that trust, because once you put your subject matter expert in front of a camera, they're speaking to your audience, they're addressing their pain points. Your audience understands that you understand them. Video is a really, really, really critical piece to getting through to that.
Would you say that it's more about reducing risk as especially as you get into higher ticket B2B solution selling, whether that's software or service, doesn't really matter. When teams are making their shortlist of 2, 3 vendors, 4, 5 vendors, however many they pick, do you think it's about, yes, occupying mind space, but also like, if I'm going to present, whether I don't know, let's say I'm the marketing manager or the head of marketing that's then going to present options to my VP, my CMO, whatever, am I thinking, yeah, I know I've seen these 3 brands a lot, these 4 brands a lot, I've seen a lot of their stuff on LinkedIn, or I've been served a lot of their ads over time, I've consumed a lot of their stuff on socials, or I've been part of their community. And I also think that if we invest in their offer, not a lot can go wrong. Like, is that a big part of it, like risk reduction, or is it also kind of they stand out as the clear choice? Like, what do you think are kind of those triggers, I suppose?
Yeah, I think I think every buyer has their reasons for going with whichever vendor that they go with. I think a lot of it is scientific, where it's you checking off all the boxes. The reality is a lot of vendors out there check all the same boxes. So it's not really, about your messaging or making sure that your product has value, because that's already a given. If you're in the race, like, you should already check all those boxes. But it's how do you make sure that between these 5 competitors, you make the list, because I can't tell you how many vendor, evaluations I've gone through, and all vendors pretty much look the same. But what's going to make me, convert with one out of the other? And that's, brand, that's relationships. But relationships, I would argue, is part of brand. My relationship with my AE, my relationship with my CSM, that's all about how I view a brand, if I trust the brand or not. So I think it all comes into play, and I think everybody has their different reasons for going with different vendors. Ultimately, in I think big ticket B2B, it comes down to relationships and trust. I will go with one vendor over another if I have prior experience with them that I know that they're tried and true. I don't want to get fired over bringing on a bad vendor, because that happens. So there is a risk in any buyer when they make a decision. So it's like I think, like you said, it's de-risking that, and a lot of the mindshare building is building trust.
So, building mindshare, is it something that every B2B company should be doing, or is there a right stage of your company that you should be at in order to make it a sound investment of cash or resource? Reason I ask is, I suppose I'm trying to put it into perspective for B2B marketers or founders that are tuning in. Like, is it something we should be doing from the off, or does it make more sense to try and capture that 5% of prospects that are in market now with things like ads, SEO, etc.? And then when we've got kind of some more ramp space, whether that is a round of funding or whether that is we've hit a certain revenue milestone, then the mindshare process we're talking about makes more sense. Like, what are your thoughts there?
That's a great question. If I were to think about, any organization that should invest in mindshare, I would think about, how cluttered is your space? When you talk to your prospective buyers, how, when they search on Google, webinar tool alternatives, how many, search results come up? How cluttered is your space where you do need to stand out? Chances are most spaces are pretty stacked. There's a lot of competition out there if you have product market fit, which is a good thing. You want competition. But when there's competition, the fight is now for mindshare. So I think it's really understanding your market, whether or not you have, key players that you're going against that you can win through brand if there is not a ton of product differentiation. That's how I would, consider whether or not mindshare is an appropriate time for you to be investing in. I think there should always be an investment in mindshare. It's just the level of investment, whether it's a bigger chunk or a smaller chunk.
And would you say there's a time where it does not make sense?
My hot take here is no, because I think that if you're in the B2B selling world, B2B traditionally is a longer deal cycle, requires multiple stakeholders, and the nature of that, you're going to have to be able to use content to influence that journey, because that 95-5 rule is still true across the board.
Yeah, I think it's like if you've got a sales team, it's almost like their dream. Like I can imagine being a seller at a company like, let's say, for instance, Gong, that have built up one of the biggest names in call recording, and the category that they've built up, which, well, it's way more than call recordings now and that side of things. But I can imagine if you're selling a company like that compared to maybe a brand new brand, just on sales discovery calls alone, if the leads have come inbound, you know that they're probably comparing 2 or 3 options. And if someone's heard of your brand like everywhere for years and years and years, it's just such an unfair advantage. Not that Gong are a sponsor of the show or anything like that. It's just the first one that came into my head that I've probably been served a lot of ads at over the years. But it's almost like if you can build that foundation, it just gives your sales team an unfair advantage, really, going into those demo calls or those discovery calls.
Yep, absolutely. It's really about making your demand gen, your inbound and outbound efforts more effective down the funnel. So it's they play together.
So if a company is kind of thinking this, there are a lot of competitors in our marketplace, and this is something that we've been neglecting. Like we're tired of folks going with other vendors because they're doing a lot more of this, or maybe the competitors have just been around a longer time, so have just not done it by choice, but they've just become the preferred brand because they've been around longer, or they've got a higher ad spend or something else. Like, what are some of the first steps that you should take if you want to start building Mindshare in your category?
Yeah. I would say the first step is really getting to know your community, your audience, really understand what their pain points are outside of your product. Every ICP, every persona has a pain point, and it's really, really figuring out what that is so then you can address it head on, because once you address that pain point head on and you can provide value to solve that pain point, you start building that rapport and trust. So I think the first step is really understanding who your audience is, what they care about. And then creating content to help fill that void. So any problem, pain point that you have, that your audience has, create a series, like a fireside chat series every 2 weeks, where you're interviewing leaders, thought leadership content, and creating thought leadership content over video. Just recording it over video, doing a live interview, something like this, and recording that content, that will be able to fuel your entire content system, starting with Mindshare, because it really starts with thought leadership. And so once you have a system in place where you're consistently creating live video content, because that's truly what I believe works the best, you could do live video, recorded video, so like interviews like this that are recorded. Once you have that video asset every week, make it a system. Take that 1 hour video and you can turn it into up to 20 pieces of content across different channels, really amplifying it. So you're turning your long form video into short clips, turn it into blog posts, turn it into social media content, turn it into email newsletters. That is how you can amplify and really, really build Mindshare from a single message. And being consistent. That's why I said, start a show or a series, because that consistency is going to help build that conversation, that longevity with your audience. People will come back for more, and that's what you want. You want to be that go-to resource. And this can be difficult before AI. You have to do all this manually. To have to download this recording, I would have to get it transcribed. I would have to get a writer to help me write a blog. But with AI now, you can automate a lot of that process and make it really, really seamless. You can turn 1 hour of video content into your entire months of content within, a couple of hours. And so really, really trying to get more mileage out of every piece of video content, because that's when you put, a camera in front of a subject matter expert, that's money. Like that is so gold. And if you amplify it to the right audience, that's how you build Mindshare and build that runway for your brand.
Yeah, big fan of building content engines. And what's your point of view in terms of making sure that the content you're putting out isn't just generic stuff? Because I think I'm a bit biased because a lot of my clients are in B2B tech and SaaS. So I think everyone, if they've not started a podcast yet or some kind of series or webinar, is in the process of doing it. Whereas if we look at other industries, it's probably not as popular. Maybe more folks are moving into it. So I suppose, one, how do you get the angle to make sure that yours is differentiated to your audience just thinking, oh, bloody hell, another podcast, like I've seen 10 of these already?
Yeah, I think, a lot of people are afraid of staying niche and like to go broad because they don't want to miss out on any topics. But I think it's important to stay niche. And I'm going to highlight something I said earlier where it's really important to, interview your community, your audience, and figure out what their pain point is. They're gonna have more than one pain point. They're gonna have 5 to 10 pain points, but it's really, really important for you to hone in on just maybe focusing on 1 or 2 of them, because you can't solve all of their problems. You have to pick and choose which ones are worth your time and investment. And once you pick and choose those few things that you really, really want to own, the spaces where you really, really want to own, and clearing that pain point, I like to bring on guests and that can help with those pain points, because those guests can provide real life examples on video that can't be replicated with generic AI content. These are actual case examples that are actually helpful. People like to hear data points, proof points, frameworks. That's really how you can guarantee value, is really starting on the content backbone. Like what is it that actually your audience cares about, and building from there.
Yeah. Sounds smart. I want to get back to your choice to build a community, because it sounds like that was one of the real big driving forces of the company's growth. Is that fair to say?
I would say that's definitely one of them, yes.
What made you decide that was the right thing, or your team decide that was the right thing to do? Because there's so many things you can do in B2B marketing. Like you said, you could have started a podcast back then, or a specific series or something else. Like why that, and why then?
We decided to start a community back then because, we interviewed up to 20 different customers that were in our ICP that we have built a lot of trust and relationship with, and being kind of like a product advisor. And across the board, something consistent that we heard was that there is no safe space for us to go to. And so we decided to create that safe space because of just, they were asking for it. And so in terms of creating that safe space, yes, it could have turned into a podcast. We started with a Slack community because, ultimately I wanted to see actual humans, actual names and people signing up. So that was selfishly a lead generation thing for me. But as we decided to grow too, because like you said, it doesn't have to just be a Slack community. We did start like a show. I mentioned every 2 weeks we have Event Marketers Live that kind of went along with the community. And so we did grow in different channels where the community can engage. But we started with a Slack community because that's what we heard was something that was missing in that world.
Good stuff. And I think that is brilliant in terms of the customer research. Like they've literally, sometimes B2B marketing gets made way more complex than it is. And I think, I made a dedicated episode, a solo episode on Breaking B2B recently, where I did kind of a bit of a hot take on kind of what's working in B2B marketing this year. And a lot of it was just fundamental stuff, like getting a regular feedback loop from either your recently won customers or target prospects, to kind of understand like not just surface level pain points, but expensive problems and what they hate about your industry, what frustrates them the most, like what's the most arduous point of working with a solution or software or service like yours, and like going into those really kind of deep questions. Because if you can get under the skin of that kind of stuff, it's just so useful to fuel your messaging, or in your case actually gave you the idea to build out this community that's then been like a huge proponent of the growth to the business. So I think if ever there is a point for folks tuning in that think kind of customer research is a waste of time or resource, it kind of gives you the answer that it's never a waste of time, really, if you're thinking about that.
Absolutely.
So we've covered quite a lot of ground. What I'd like to say, I mean, we've kind of touched on this a bit already, but is Mindshare, like, if you're thinking about a budget perspective, should Mindshare, and if you're trying to get exec buy-in, like with the rest of the leadership, do you kind of assign it a set number or a set amount of resource from your team, i.e. we're going to do this much on Google ads, this much on LinkedIn ads, this much on SEO, this much on website, and Mindshare is going to get this chunk? Is that how it works, or should you be thinking about it differently when making a pitch for leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of the times when you're, I'm guilty of this, when you're going into, annual planning and you have a budget that you have to fill out, it's really, brand budget versus demand budget. And there's different tactics that go under each bucket. Mindshare actually doesn't just exclude demand. Mindshare is part of demand. It's, it blends in from brand all the way through to demand. And Mindshare is about that consistent customer journey through content. And so that includes that demand budget too. So I wouldn't actually have a separate budget for Mindshare. I would have a content strategy that covers Mindshare. So when you're thinking about your customer journey and the content that you have to produce and create for the year, how does that kind of execute? So it's part of an overall strategy, and it's not just a siloed on how much money you should be spending, but it's also about the content that you're producing and making it make sense to the actual customer journey that you're trying to influence.
Okay, and what would you say in terms of, for folks that are tuning in and thinking this all sounds great, but I know one of the first questions I'm going to be asked is, how long is it going to take until we actually see some pipeline and some deals off the back of this? Tricky one to answer, I'm sure, but from your experience, feel free to use the community as an example, or any maybe clients of Goldcast. Like, what are they seeing in terms of kind of when they actually start a program to when it actually drives results, and how are they going about kind of tracking that?
Yeah, I think that to see how your mind share is growing, there are certain metrics that are indicators of that. And so if you're building mind share through content on social, looking at your social engagement metrics, the lift there, I think ultimately the goal of mind share is to growing your reach and growing your audience and the frequency that they're engaging with your content. So if you're very, very specific in specific channels and executing Mindshare, social is a great channel for that. Another way that I like to look at over time, if you're building Mindshare, is measuring your brand search volume. If you are investing in content and investing in your Mindshare, over time, you should see a lift in people searching for your brand. I think that if you're looking to tie it to pipeline, that's going to be tough, because if you're working with an organization that is going to have to make every single dollar bring back pipeline, that's really not how brand budgets work. And so you really need to start with buy-in on the leadership level first, is to really understand that this is a leap of faith. Understand how the buying journey works, and understand that this is the way that we have to invest in our marketing. It's not just a one in, one out kind of science. And so that's really challenging when organizations are in a place where they have to fight for a Mindshare budget or a Mindshare strategy, because there is no executive buy-in on that type of thinking. So for that, my advice would be start with influencing your stakeholders by explaining to them how marketing works, how the buying journey has changed, and how the way that we sell also needs to change.
Yeah, nice. It's almost like going back to the example you gave earlier. So it's like, if you're going to get a chat software, what options are you evaluating? Mm-hmm. And they'll probably tell you 2 or 3 straight away if they're in tech like we are. But you could obviously use an example to your own industry, and it's like, why those 3? And then kind of getting them to use the words out of their own mouth of why they picked those 3. Then they'll be like, oh, so that's what Mindshare is. That's brand marketing. That's why I'm thinking like. So it's sometimes like folks need to convince themselves, and there's like no better way if you can kind of get them to explain kind of how they pick choices and all that good stuff. So I like the way you've tied that back in. To me, feel free to disagree, but for me it feels like real small scrappy startups that are bootstrapped. I think if they want to do this, I think, like you say, kind of building communities, building podcasts and stuff that's more sweat equity makes more sense. And I think as you jump up to funded companies, mid-market companies that have got the cash, it feels like you can hit this from a lot more angles, kind of ramping more paid into it, more resources into it, but probably not the smartest idea if you're kind of low on cash or resource. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's cheap ways to do Mindshare. There's expensive ways to do Mindshare. It's really about ultimately understanding your audience and delivering value through content. I think as you're further down the funnel, you're delivering value through product, a lot of more lower funnel, mid to lower funnel content. But when you're at the top of the funnel where Mindshare really matters the most, it's really making the case for your category, really allowing your audience to understand that, hey, we actually understand you. We're building a product just for you. So follow along and learn from us. I think that's where you can really humanize a brand on sort of the buyer level, and that content opportunity is extremely valuable.
Appreciate it. Kelly, enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate you coming on. Please do share more about how folks can connect with you, more about Goldcast, and any way you'd like to plug.
Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar with Goldcast, Goldcast is an AI-powered video content platform built specifically for B2B marketers. We help companies create engaging live video through webinars, events, pre-recorded video through podcasts and interviews, and then we use AI to help transform that content into snackable, multi-channel assets that really drive engagement across the entire buying journey, helping you build that mindshare. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Cheers, Kelly. Appreciate the chat.
Awesome. Thank you.
No worries. And as always, if you enjoyed today's episode, why not join thousands of B2B legends enjoying the Breaking B2B newsletter? Head over to breakingb2b.com, hit the newsletter. You'll get weird, unusual B2B marketing and SaaS marketing strategies, experiments, as well as interviews with marketing leaders just like Kelly. And with that, I appreciate you tuning in. We should catch you on the next one. Cheers.